Welcome to the Crazy Alchemist podcast, where alchemy, occultism, and strange history come alive.
The oldest surviving amulet factories date to Tel El Amarna, the short-lived capital that Akhenaten built in the Egyptian desert around 1350 BCE. When Flinders Petrie excavated the site, he found approximately 5,000 clay molds for mass-producing faience charms, small amulets in the shape of wedgeot eyes, scarabs, jed pillars, and tayet knots, stamped out by the hundreds. 300 kilometers north at Kantir, the Ramesside capital, Ramesses, excavators found thousands more. This was industrial production. The objects were small, cheap, and designed to protect the wearer from evil, disease, and death. The business model has not changed in 3,400 years. Egypt ran on amulets. The living wore them, the dead required them. The Book of the Dead specified which amulets had to accompany the body into the afterlife and what materials they had to be made from. Spell 30b required a heart scarab of green jasper placed over the chest. Spell 155 required a jed pillar of gold at the neck. Spell 156 required a tayet knot of red jasper moistened with plant juice. Every burial needed these objects, and every object needed a maker. The demand was guaranteed. The dead kept dying, and each one needed a full set of amulets that met the ritual specifications. This created a permanent market, as predictable as food or clothing. At Deir el-Medina, the workers' village near the Valley of the Kings, clay tablets record amulets changing hands alongside bread, beer, and sandals. They were everyday goods. At Naucratis, the Greek trading colony in the Nile Delta, a so-called scarab factory operating around 600 BCE produced hundreds of scarabs, amulets, and molds. The products turned up across the Mediterranean. This was export manufacturing. And where there was manufacturing, there was fraud. Egyptian scribes marked genuine lapis lazuli with the word ma, meaning true, to distinguish it from imitations. The fact that this label existed tells you how common the fakes were. Faience itself was invented partly to imitate turquoise and lapis for customers who could not afford the real thing. Color mattered more than material. If it looked like lapis, it sold like lapis. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century CE, called magic the most fraudulent of all skills. He used the Latin phrase fraudulentissima artium. He spent entire sections of his natural history cataloging and debunking the claims made for magical objects. Mole teeth for toothache, scorpion joints for fever, snake hearts for court cases. He returned to the subject repeatedly, each time with fresh contempt. Galen, the most influential physician of antiquity, took a more measured approach. He acknowledged that a green jasper amulet worn over the stomach might have some benefit, citing the semi-legendary Egyptian king Necupso, who reportedly wore one shaped like a dragon over his digestive organs. But Galen added that the stone worked just as well without the engraved serpent. The carving was decorative. The physicians charged for it anyway. The greatest amulet scam of the ancient world belonged to Alexander of Abonotyke, documented by the satirist Lucian around 180 CE. Alexander constructed a fake snake god called Glykon using a live serpent fitted with a linen head on horsehair and wood mechanisms. He set up an oracle, charged 1 drachma and 2 obols per consultation, and processed roughly 80,000 consultations per year. When the Antonine Plague struck the Roman Empire in 166 CE, Alexander saw his opportunity. He sold a verse to be inscribed over doorways as protection against the disease. The verse spread across the empire. Lucian noted with satisfaction that the households displaying Alexander's protective inscription were the ones that got hit hardest. 1,800 years later, archaeologists found the same verse on an amulet excavated in London and in an inscription at Antioch. The product outlived the fraud by nearly 2 millennia. Professional magicians kept pre-made curse tablets in stock with blank spaces for the victim's name to be filled in on the spot. They set up outside temples and sanctuaries, offering love spells, business curses, sports hexes, and legal jinxes. The Greek magical papyri, dating from the 2nd century BCE to the 5th century CE, served as practical handbooks for itinerant magical practitioners serving paying customers. Rome tried to regulate it. The 12 Tables, around 450 BCE, made it a crime to enchant away crops by magic. The Lex Cornelia, under Sulla in 81 BCE, classed magicians alongside murderers and poisoners. Chaldean astrologers were expelled from Rome more than once. None of it worked. The market was too large and the product too easy to manufacture. Between the 6th and 8th century CE, across what is now Iraq and Iran, tens of thousands of incantation bowls were produced, ceramic vessels inscribed in spiraling text with Aramaic, Mandaic, or Hebrew scripts, designed to trap demons, protect households, and cure illness. They were buried upside down under the floors and thresholds of homes. The bowls were commissioned across religious lines. Jewish, Christian, Mandaean, and Zoroastrian families all bought them. The scribes borrowed freely from each other's traditions, mixing angelic names, Solomonic seals, Quranic phrases, and Talmudic formulas on the same bowl. The customer wanted protection. The scribe provided whatever combination seemed most comprehensive. Between 10 and 20% of surviving incantation bowls contain pseudoscript. The text looks like writing. It spirals in the right direction. The letter forms approximate real characters, but it is gibberish. No language, no meaning, no magical formula. Someone who could not read or write sat down and imitated the appearance of literacy, then sold the result to someone who could not read or write either. In the year 363 CE, the Council of Laodicea issued Canon 36. Clergy were forbidden from making amulets. The practice was condemned as pagan. The Church's position was clear. The Church then spent the next 17 centuries building the largest protective object distribution network in history. Agnus Dei wax medallions, stamped with the image of the Lamb of God and blessed by the Pope, entered production no later than the 9th century. Pope Paul II, in 1470, reserved their manufacture exclusively to the papacy, specifically to avoid trafficking. The fact that he needed to issue this order tells you the trafficking was already happening. Blessed metals, scapulars, holy water, and relics filled the same functional role as the faience amulets of Tel El Amarna, small portable objects believed to protect the bearer from evil. The theological distinction was that these were sacramentals, deriving their power from the Church's prayer rather than from the object itself. In practice, people wore blessed metals the same way Egyptians wore wedge-at eyes. The pardoners were the traveling salesmen of this system, unordained men, sometimes licensed by bishops, sometimes operating with forged credentials. They moved through the countryside selling indulgences and relics. Chaucer gave them their permanent portrait in the Canterbury Tales. His pardoner carries pig bones in a glass jar, passes them off as saints' relics, and brags openly about the scam to his fellow pilgrims. The relic trade operated at a larger scale. Deus Dona, a deacon of the 9th century, ran a family operation that dug up bodies from Roman cemeteries and sold them as named saints to churches across Europe. An unknown number of medieval first-class relics are his anonymous Roman dead. Guibert of Nogent, writing around 1119, attacked what he called pointless wonderworks perpetrated through obvious fraud and spread by clerics mainly anxious to collect cash. Calvin, in his treatise on relics in 1543, catalogued the absurdity systematically. 3 foreskins of Christ in simultaneous circulation, enough pieces of the true cross to build a ship. His inventory covered 60 cities. The treatise went through 20 editions in 80 years. Indulgences turned spiritual protection into a financial product with tiered pricing. The theology was specific. An indulgence did not forgive sins, it remitted the temporal punishment that remained after confession. In theory, it was a carefully bounded spiritual instrument. In practice, Johann Tetzel sold them from a wagon.
The 1517 German indulgence campaign had a financial architecture that would have impressed a modern investment banker. Archbishop Albrecht of Mainz borrowed approximately 30,000 gold florins from the Fugger banking house to secure the office of archbishop. Pope Leo X authorized a special indulgence sale in German territories. Half the proceeds would repay the Fugger loan. Half would fund the construction of St. Peter's Basilica. A Fugger agent accompanied Tetzel on his sales tour and held a key to the collection chest. The banker and the preacher traveled together. Martin Luther's 95 Theses, posted on October 31, 1517, were a direct response. Read in one light, they are a theological argument. Read in another, they are a consumer protection complaint. Luther's core objection was that the Church was selling something it did not own and could not deliver. The pattern repeats across every religious tradition. In Islamic practice, the tawiz, the protective amulet, occupies a contested space. When inscribed with Quranic verses, many scholars consider it permissible. Others classify all tawiz as shirk or polytheism. The fraud operates in the gap between these positions. Practitioners have been documented writing Quranic text upside down or substituting demon names for divine names on amulets sold to clients who cannot read Arabic script. Jewish amulet traditions have Talmudic roots and were elaborated through Kabbalistic practice. Traditionalists have criticized printed amulets as useless, arguing that a genuine kamea requires individual preparation by a qualified practitioner. The Hamsa, the open hand symbol found across North Africa and the Middle East, traces its iconography to the Phoenician goddess Tanit. The name Hand of Fatima was a French colonial invention. Today, it is one of the most commercially reproduced protective symbols in the world, available as jewelry, phone cases, and keychains. The global spiritual services market was estimated at $376 billion in 2024. Crystal healing alone accounts for $3.2 billion. The U.S. psychic services industry generates $2.3 billion annually. EMF protection pendants, marketed as shields against electromagnetic radiation, are sold with pseudoscientific claims about negative ion technology. In December 2021, the Netherlands banned a range of quantum pendants after testing revealed they were mildly radioactive. The anti-radiation devices were emitting radiation. Peter Popoff, a televangelist exposed by James Randi in 1986 for using a concealed earpiece to fake divine knowledge, declared bankruptcy and then rebuilt his operation around miracle spring water. Investigative reporting found the water was purchased from Costco. Jim Bakker was convicted of 24 counts of fraud in 1989, served 5 years, returned to television, and in 2020 sold colloidal silver as a cure for COVID. Todd Kuntz built a ministry around seed theology, instructing followers to send specific dollar amounts with the promise that God would return the money multiplied. The mechanism was identical to Alexander of Abinoticus charging 1 drachma and 2 obols per consultation in the 2nd century, a specific price for a specific spiritual service, payable immediately, with results promised later and unverifiable.
In 2010, researchers at the University of Cologne published a study in Psychological Science. Lysanne Damisch, Barbara Stobarok, and Thomas Musweiler gave participants golf putts, memory tasks, and anagram puzzles. Half were told they had a lucky charm. The Lucky Charm group performed measurably better across every task. The mechanism was self-efficacy. The charm increased the person's confidence in their own ability, and that confidence translated into improved performance. The object did nothing. The belief in the object did something real. This is the knot at the center of the amulet trade. The product is not entirely fraudulent. A person who believes they are protected behaves differently from a person who believes they are exposed. The confidence is real, and so is the improved performance. The attribution to the object is false, but the effect is not. The demand cycle is self-sustaining. Fear creates the market. The amulet provides temporary relief through placebo confidence. The confidence is attributed to the object. The next time fear returns, the customer buys another one. The cycle has no natural endpoint because the underlying fear has no natural endpoint either. The spikes are predictable. Alexander sold his protective doorway verses during the Antonine Plague. The miraculous metal was first struck during the Paris cholera epidemic of 1832. Crystal sales surged during COVID-19. Every pandemic, every war, every economic collapse sends the same signal through the market. People are afraid, and afraid people buy protection. 3,400 years of continuous operation. The materials change from faience to wax to crystal to digital download, and the sellers change with them. The fear does not. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to the Crazy Alchemist podcast and check out the full article with sources and images on our website, crazyalchemist.com.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to visit crazyalchemist.com for more intriguing content and follow Crazy Alchemist on Instagram and Facebook to stay connected.